at that point, I think I was starting to play better than I had before, just because I think I corrected some problems that I had that I didn't realize I was doing. Because I'm a more efficient player. I mean, no doubt. I mean, that was probably the benefit of Bell's Palsy, is I became a more efficient player.
This episode contains adult language and adult humor.
Since when have trumpet players ever been considered adults?
If you are easily offended by these types of conversations, consider switching to the oboe. Welcome to the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. My guest for this episode is Craig Kenney. Craig, well, he's a hidden gem. A world-class lead player, Craig's career did not take the conventional route. Instead of forging a name on the road or in the studios, Craig chose to stay close to home in South Central Pennsylvania, a decision that placed him in the perfect spot to spend 2 decades as a lead player for the legendary Dave Stahl. But his recent experience rebuilding his chops after a bout with Bells Palsy is a masterclass in determination and resiliency that every player can benefit from. So, pour yourself a big glass, pull up a chair, and let the hang begin. All right, here we have another episode of the Trumpet Gurus Hang, and I am joined by a gentleman that you may not know, but I do know, and I know personally. How about that? Name dropping here on the show, and it is Craig Kenney. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jose.
Oh,
Pleasure.
man. Yeah, it's so funny. Craig and I live maybe about 30 minutes away from each other, 40 minutes, as the crow flies. And rarely, if ever, see each other. I mean, we've seen each other a couple of times. Like I came to catch you on a couple of gigs with Dave Stahl years ago, and other than that, it's just like, it's so funny how sometimes you can be so close to people and have so much in common, and you just never see them.
And you subbed for me on a local band, and the next day I had all kind of messages. Well, let's just leave it at that.
Oh, okay. Why did you
weren't very happy?
They weren't?
No, you weren't very happy.
Oh, you were. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, that was a different story.
Yep.
Anyway, it's good to have you because you've had a really interesting career, and I find it having talked to so many different trumpet players in different kind of stages in their careers and different levels of exposure. You've had this interesting career because I'll backtrack for a second. I have talked to a number of people. I mean, I had a lot of respect for you, myself, some of my other good friends who've played with you, like our mutual friend, late Dave Buffington. Dave, had nothing but fantastic things to say about you and your playing. But a lot of the cats that I know that know you, some of the more high profile players, some of the DC guys and things like that say, Craig is a beast. He's one of the best lead players in the area. And it's like you're the player that that the people in the know, but the general trumpet world maybe don't know much about you. So, I mean, what prompted you to go the route of staying home as opposed to pursuing a traveling career?
Well, I have a really not a typical upbringing. I mean, I really never had a teacher to guide me along. I didn't have a teacher till college. And living in Dallastown, in the middle of nowhere, there really wasn't really a lot of push towards, you got to go here, you got to go there. When I was looking at colleges, I went to Temple University to look at it, and it was such culture shock. I mean, I remember telling my dad, we're driving down Girard Avenue, seeing all the cars on the cinder blocks and, one on fire. And I was like, I'm going home. I don't need this, So, and, in retrospect, I wish I would have forced myself to continue with it, because maybe the path would have changed. But yeah, I came home and went to a small school in upstate Pennsylvania. So, I mean, that kind of limited what I was doing, and I was really tight with my family. And it was one of those things where I think I was too young to make those decisions, and I felt like I needed to stay home or central to my family. So I just never left the area. I met my would-be wife then, and just things kind of stayed central Pennsylvania. So I've had opportunities, I've had offers, but I just never took them. So hindsight, you never know. But
Yeah. Well, I think that's, but there's a major lesson there for a lot of people is, that if family is important to you, if an area is important to you for whatever reason, then if that's important, then that's what you need to do. You need to stick with it. And a lot of times I think people, there's nothing wrong with putting those greater needs ahead of your career aspirations,
right.
because you can still carve out
Yeah,
a wonderful career for yourself.
I have no regrets. It's fine. So I'm happy with what I've done and where I'm at. So
Yeah. Well, and speaking of which, I mean, you built a great career working for years as the lead trumpet player for Dave Stahl in his big band and in his sacred orchestra.
right.
So, I mean, how did that connection start? And what are some? I mean, because Dave is he's kind of in that pantheon of historic lead players of our generation. And that book, you had some heavy lifting to do in that band. So, how did that get started, and what are some kind of the major lessons that you learned in that process of playing all those years with Dave?
Well, funny thing is, I really never heard of Dave Stahl. I mean, I've heard him and didn't realize who he was or what he was all about. I guess it was in about 1996. A friend of mine locally here said, "Hey, you want to go hear a band in Lebanon? It's a Dave Stahl band." And he said, "Come over to my house. I just got an album, and it was Anaconda, and it was his Scream Machine." And I was like, "Yeah, this is cool. Let's go. That's fine." So we go to the gig, and a friend of mine's the whole time he's like elbowing me. He's like, "You got to get on this band. You can do this easy. You got to do this." So at that point in my career, I was only playing local church and classical gigs. I mean, I had left pretty much all big band stuff alone for years. So I went up and introduced myself to Dave, and I had a business card at the time, and I said, "I'd like to get on my band or get on your band and see what it's about." So this was probably about October, and then he took my card, just kind of shook his head and grinned. And by January, I had a call from him wanting to know if I wanted to sit in on rehearsal. So I did it. There was a couple other new guys there that night too, that were kind of, quote unquote auditioning. But every chart he picked, I played in high school. It was like one after another. So I had them up my sleeve yet, so I knew them. I mean, it was like Woody Herman's La Fiesta and a lot of Maynard charts and stuff that I already had done, Country Road, MacArthur Park and stuff. So I sat, I played through the rehearsal, and actually backtrack, my friend that took me to the concert, he also was invited to come up too. So after the rehearsal, I got called out in the hallway by him, and he wanted to know if I wanted to join the band. And I, of course, said, yeah, I mean, I'm thrilled. So, but my friend wasn't. So, he's the one that talked me into going, but he wasn't asked to come back. So I feel bad for him. But so that's kind of how it all started. Started in 97. Didn't play lead right away. That's fine. I got a lot of, needed a lot of learning experience under his current lead player for a couple years. I don't know, it was probably about 1999, 2000. Then I got a chance to play lead, and I made a good impression, I guess, playing the second book long enough that he wanted me to come on, stay on the lead book. So my first night on the lead book didn't go so well. I was chipping notes. I was having all kind of problems. And after we're done, Dave looks at me and goes, "You're coming to my house for a lesson." And I was like, "Oh, geez." So anyway, I took some lessons from him. It was a learning experience. I mean, I didn't play the way he exactly wanted it, because anybody that knows him, he's a perfectionist. I mean, if you play a 16th note wrong somewhere in a chart, you're going to know about it. I mean, it's just, he's that meticulous about stuff. So anyway, things progressed, and he started a sacred orchestra that played Sunday mornings, church services. And I continued to be his lead player. And I guess around 2003, he asked me if I wanted to be his band manager. So yeah, he calls me up one morning and he's like, are you interested in doing it? Of course, I'm like, yeah, I'd love to do it. So, he gave me the list of players I was allowed to use, and we reformed the band slightly, and kind of everything else was history. I did his internet side, the webmaster part, did the scheduling, I did organize the guys for the band, kind of a middleman for the players. So, and did that up until 2020. So, I learned a ton. I mean, things didn't end well, but I got the utmost respect for him, because I still think he's the cleanest lead player that's ever lived. I mean, yeah, there's guys that played higher, there's guys played louder. I don't think there was anybody more accurate than Dave Stahl. I mean, he was phenomenal, and I learned a ton. So I have respect for him in that way yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see, being a lead player, playing lead for a vocalist, or playing lead for, a band fronted by a sax player. Okay. Yeah, that's a job. It's hard enough as it is. But being a lead player for a band that's run by one of the greatest lead players, in the business, that's got to have a level of intensity to it that is, it takes things up another notch.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I mean, a lot of his book, he always had great lead players. I mean, Joe Masello, almost every chart I'm playing has Joe Masello's name at the top, because he didn't have 1, 2, 3, 4. He had Joe, he had Danny Kahn, and et cetera down the line. So it was always, I was playing Joe Masello parts. So, I mean, those are huge shoes to fill. So, and then playing some of those charts in the late 80s, I mean, the lead parts were phenomenally hard. And then to imagine Dave solo on top of that yet. So, yeah, I mean, it was an incredible learning experience. I mean, I owe a ton to him for that. I learned a lot. I mean, every night was a learning experience. And yeah, I mean, when I first got on the band, it was so intimidating, because you made a mistake, you turn around and look at you, especially me. I mean, I was a hot seat. So, any little chip note, I'd get a quick glare back. And after a while, I learned to look at other guys in the section. So maybe he thought somebody else did it. So
that is an important skill to have. How to deflect.
That's right. Pass the buck.
Now, so, I mean, in terms of how playing that book, I mean, because, like you're saying, you're playing, Woody charts, you're playing Maynard charts, you're playing all these other kind of things. Definitely high energy. That it not only requires the chops, so you've got to have the chops to play it, but there's some specific stylistic nuances that need to be there. So if you're giving a recommendation to a young player, like, okay, well, you want to be a big band lead player, here are some of the things that you really need to think about to make yourself best suited to be able to fill the shoes if you get called to play a lead vocal, especially on a band like that.
Well, I mean, the one thing I learned was, I mean, a lot of people have the thing is make the music your own, but in that situation, you got to study the lead players that played that book. Like, I mean, when Dave was on the road with all these bands, he would copy the charts. So that's how he accumulated a lot of these charts. So when we played a Buddy Rich chart, he played it the way Buddy Rich played it. Woody, you played it the way Woody. Bassy, you played it in the Bassy style. So you had to adjust in every chart. You didn't just make it your own, because however he recorded it with those artists is the way he expected it played. Whether it be cutoffs are all different, between the bands, or just stylistically. I mean, so much different between Bassy and Buddy Rich. I mean, it's an amazing difference. I mean, to me, Buddy's book is the hardest book possible. I mean, most demanding. So, but yeah, they all have their own nuances. The Woody Herman book. I mean, the Woody Herman was more about playing it like Chase did, not so much the way Dave did, because he wasn't with Woody that long. So, but yeah, I mean, my advice to young kids growing up is listen. You can't listen enough, and don't just listen to one player. I mean, with Bassy, pick out all the lead players throughout all the generations and stuff. No, not just one person. The same with Buddy. I mean, yeah, listen to Dave Stahl, but listen to Lynn Biviano. Listen to them all, and then see what, because overall they're still the same style. It's just the way the lead players, might have changed a little bit up. But yeah, my advice to, people starting out with the big bands is listen. I mean, it's invaluable, really. I mean, these kids today don't know who these artists are, and it's sad. I have a student that I was teaching, and I was like, this is a chart that was made famous by Woody Herman, and I had no idea. I'm like, all right, well, your lesson for next week is find your Spotify app and search Woody Herman, because that's all the kids know anymore. It's not like you can pull out a CD. Actually, I offered to give them a CD, and they're like, how do I play this? And I'm like, well, all right, never mind. How about Spotify?
Yeah. And, and this to me is I mean, I'm showing my old age on this, becoming the grumpy old man. But one of the things that I dislike about our modern, technology and things like, streaming services, I miss liner notes.
Me too.
I mean, I couldn't wait. I actually used to manage a record store back in the 90s, early 90s. And we would get in, these albums and, playing them so that, the people would want to buy them. And I would always just like scan the liner notes. I would stand behind the counter and read the liner notes. And I was a huge, like so many trumpet players, is a huge fan of Jerry Hay and his work. And anytime something came in and I saw his name on the liner notes, I immediately bought it. Yeah, I don't care. I don't care what kind of music it was. I just bought it because I really loved what he did, and I would want to listen to it. That might be the only track I ever played off of it.
Right. But, well, that's the way I was in the late 90s. It's like when I bought a CD, I'd look at the liner notes first. It's like, I wanted to know who exactly was playing in the sections, and you can't do that now anymore. So.
Yeah, I mean, I hear stuff, on the radio all day. It's like, oh yeah, that's really cool. I like that. I wonder who that player is. And
right.
Now granted, you do get to a point where you can identify people by their sound. Right. If there's somebody who's got, you could identify, Lynn Biviano by his sound, like 99% of the time you were spot on if it was Lynn. Right. So there are players that you get accustomed to their sound or their approach. But when it comes to new players, when you want to try to get exposed to new sounds and new concepts, I think it's so important to be able to know who it is. So then you can do the research. So,
right. Yep, I agree.
Yeah,
100%. I'm a grumpy old man then too.
Well, it is what it is. But yeah, I do spend time out. What I'll do is if I find something that I like, it doesn't always work, but I'll go to All Music. Right. And then I'll use Shazam, and then I'll go to All Music and I'll look for any of the credits on it. And sometimes they have the credits and sometimes they don't. And I think it's a shame because if you're an artist contributing to something, even if you're just the session player, it's nice to get a little bit of recognition. It's nice to get a little bit of something for your resume besides just your paycheck. Although the paycheck's nice too. So give me both. Don't if I have to make my choice between the rest of recognition and the paycheck, give me the paycheck. Right. So speaking of different lead players, I mean, who are some of the players that influence you in your approach to the horn?
Well, actually, ironically, in high school, I was listening to a lot of the Woody Herman records that Stahl was playing lead on. But again, at that point, I wasn't putting two and two together, and without having a teacher really, saying, look at this, look at that. I mean, my high school had an outstanding jazz program, but it wasn't like somebody was a trumpet guru, So, yeah, I mean, Dave actually, some of those Thundering Herd albums, ironically, he was who I was modeling myself, because we were playing his charts in high school. Of course, Maynard, I don't consider a lead player, but I mean, my main teacher growing up was playing along with Maynard albums. But yeah, I mean, I guess my really first lead player that I got obsessed with was Wayne Bergeron, like probably most other trumpet players. I heard him in high school. Backtrack. It was 1986. Maynard was at my high school, and it was Wayne, it was Roger Ingram and Pete Olstead. And I had no idea what I was hearing. And it's like, now I'm sitting back saying, holy crap. I mean, I didn't appreciate that then. I mean, what a section. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, Wayne's a big influence on mine because he's so clean. He's got a different style than Dave. So it was, just another person to study. Like Roger Ingram, definitely when he was playing with Harry Connick, I was always listening to him, his phrasings and stuff. And Bill Chase, actually, with Woody Herman. I mean, I was listening to that years ago too. And again, didn't realize the greatness of what, I was listening to. So those were primarily my, lead guys. I mean, of course, listening to Maynard, I was always hearing Stan Mark. So, and, my first album was MF Horn 2. My parents got me when I was real young. And I remember in 7th grade, I was playing along with that album, and it was like, that was the coolest thing ever, because I didn't have anybody really, giving me music to play. So I just grew up playing in school band, and then at home, I'd come home and play with the Maynard records. So, and try to duplicate it.
So, and that's actually an interesting question, I think to discuss is, since you didn't have a teacher, your development of your upper register, was this obviously seems to be something then you kind of stumbled onto in terms of that development and that mastery of it, as opposed to having a teacher that's sitting there, talking about, this method and this mouthpiece placement and how the airstream works and stuff like that. You just did you just basically kind of figure it out on your own then?
Well, I mean, I had outstanding teachers in school. So, I mean, they got me through the basics, but there still is a small music store here in Downstown, and came across a Jet Tone Bill Chase mouthpiece. And this was probably about 1981 or so. And I started playing that probably about 5th grade. I didn't play the 7C. My brother actually started me on trumpet. So, I mean, I did play on a 7C for a while, but, it was one of those things where I kind of was nosy on my own and saw this Bill Chase Jet Tone. And I played that throughout most of high school. Even nobody said a word to me, and I was making district band, regional band, whatever, with no issues. So nobody was there saying, you don't sound good on that. It's not your typical progression. But yeah, it was one of those things where I just and it wasn't Bill Chase Jet Tone, it just said BC, so but yeah, I mean, I started playing that, and I got into a community band around the area, and I really kind of grabbed on to some local players that were 4 or 5 years older than me that I really respected. And I remember them looking at me saying, why aren't you playing a different mouthpiece? You really need to go back to like a Bach 5 or 3 or something like that. So actually in high school, I tried to force myself to go to bigger mouthpieces because, that was quote unquote the right way to go. I never could play a big mouthpiece. And again, it was just more my own practice on my own and determination. So I really didn't have anybody get mad at me for what I played until I got to college. Well, actually backtrack. To get into college, I really wasn't a scale player. I wasn't a technical player. So when I had to find out, what I needed to know to get into college, it was a big learning curve because I didn't do that stuff without having somebody at home, saying play your C scale, F scale, I didn't do that. So, there was a lot of panic right before the audition to get into school, even, to know some of the basics, which I should have known already. But yeah, the high register just came natural. I mean, I'm not saying it was because it was a small mouthpiece. It all was natural to me. And when I did get to college, first thing out of the professor's mouth was, that's not a Bach trumpet. That's not a Bach 1.5C. And I'm like, yep. And I'm not switching. So we never got along that well. Because, he was down that road where this is how you had to play to make it. And I'm like, guess what? Actually by that time, I moved on to Jerry Cowlett, took lessons from him the summer before I started college, and I was playing his horn and his trumpet. So, yeah, I wasn't very well liked in the classical professor's mind. So, but no, I mean, the upper register always seemed a little easier for me. I bought a piccolo early on because, like I said, after high school and college, I played a lot of wedding, church stuff. And I love piccolo. I mean, that was like, I think that was one of my best ways to clean my upper register. I mean, just learning the finesse it takes instead of being brute strength. I mean, it's more of a finesse thing. So I think that's really what stemmed my upper register now. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, there are a couple interesting points there that stick out to me. I think what you're talking about, like loving to play pick and stuff like that. I remember Von Nark saying to me once, well, he said when I interviewed, but when I was studying with him, he said, there are people that play in the upper register, and then there are people that hear the upper register, and those are two different things. And so you can tell the difference between someone who their sound concepts and the way that they play the instrument, they are hearing, more than the pitch itself. They're actually, that's the frequency that they want to be in. Yeah. And it just comes very natural to them. And it sounds like to me that's something, especially like your exposure when you got bit by the Maynard bug, like so many of us, especially in that period, that the 80s, 90s, like 70s, 80s, 90s seemed to be like, if you were in high school and you're a trumpet player, you're playing along the Maynard records. So you develop that sound model in your head that like, oh yeah, trumpet is supposed to be, like that. So right. That's what you gravitate towards. And then, the other thing was, and it's kind of related, and I mean, I'm speaking from my own personal experience on this too, is that you do have that, sometimes you're better off not having a teacher, because many teachers create the limitations on your playing, that if you're just experimenting with it, and if you don't know that you're not supposed to play on this mouthpiece, on a small mouthpiece, to get a big sound, if no one ever says that to you, then you just do it, and you find a way to create the sound that's in your head and in your body and your soul. And I think sometimes that music educators of all kind, they sometimes do more harm than good. And I don't think it's intentional. It's just that, it's like, well, this is the way
they're taught.
Yeah. And they just repeat that, because I mean, I went through the same thing as you did of, when I got into college, I was playing on a Jet Tone. I was playing on a T2C and a Holton ST302. I was playing on an MF horn. And, the first thing they did was like, well, they did three things. They said, Bach 1.5 C, Bach 37, and change your embouchure. Yeah. And instead of, okay, how can we take these things and tweak them, and improve on some concepts, it's just wholesale change, and it just didn't work. And, I ended up just getting out.
I mean, if I would have had a teacher, I probably wouldn't be playing where I'm at. I mean, because they would have ripped me down. They would have made me start over. They would have certainly had me on a 3C or 1.5 C, trying to force it, because that's the way it has to be. And that drives me nuts when, students come in. I mean, not everybody's made to play a 7C or a 5C or 3C. So it's just, your interview with Lynn Nicholson, I mean, Lynn hits it on the head. I mean, you should play the smallest mouthpiece you can within reason, that you can do everything you need to do on it. I mean, I never was for the progression that, the standard progression for trumpet mouthpieces. So, and that's the thing that the teachers are taught in school, this is what the kids should be playing at this point. If they're not trumpet players themselves, that's what they're going to make their kids play. I mean, they're going to go by that progression. I'm sure it happens on other instruments too, not just trumpet, but.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me because, it's like if you take trombone, for example, if you're starting a kid on trombone and he's, say, I don't know, 8 years old, you're not going to give him a bass bone.
Right.
And you're probably going to give him a short, one of those short scale trombones, because their arms aren't long enough to get to seventh position, or so it's like, okay, well, it's a small kid, so we need to make equipment that's, even like with guitars and basses, making short scale stuff so it's easier for them to play physically. So because Bud Herseth played a 1, even though we all know, anybody who doesn't know the story, please check it out, but the reason Bud played a 1 was because he had an accident, and he had scar tissue, so he had to play a larger mouthpiece to get around the scar tissue. But you've got a grown ass man playing a big mouthpiece, and to expect, someone that's 10 or 12 years old, that's much smaller and has less developed musculature, to play that same size. That's insane to me.
Yeah,
That is
that's crazy.
nuts.
And everybody's built so differently. I mean, you can't just do that. I mean, it's not an answer for everybody. I mean, you can't do that. I mean, I know some other teachers that, instead of the 7C, they start every kid on a 5B. It's just, I don't know that that's the right answer either, but I mean, it's just, at least they're thinking about it, that it's maybe not 7C's, maybe not necessarily the right beginning mouthpiece for everybody. So
yeah, I know. It's like everything is made up by someone at some point. Somebody just one day, the heavens didn't open up and a 7C came floating down, and this is the mouthpiece that all the players are starting. Somebody started that, and for whatever reason, maybe they thought that was a sound solution, but just because that's the way it's always been done doesn't mean that's the way that we should always do it. Right. And so as a teacher, I mean, how do you go about helping your students find a mouthpiece? Mouthpiece seems to be a very popular topic. How do you help a kid pick the gear that's going to help them out the best?
It all depends. I don't teach as many private students as I used to. I have more adults than I have kids at this point. But as far as kids go, I mean, I do let them start on the 7C. But if I see, I got a kid right now, he's only been playing a year and he's already playing to high F above high C. And it's like, he sits here and warms up and I'm like, where'd you learn that? And he's like, I learned it from you. And I'm like, oh, uh-oh. But I mean, I'm thinking about right now trying to maybe move him on maybe 10.5 C or something, go that direction instead of where he's at. I also have another student that always is complaining that the mouthpiece hurts his lips all the time. He practices, but yet he always has a crease. So maybe a different rim size for him. I don't know. It's so individual right now. I have an adult student that came back after 30 some years of playing, and he switched to a Bobby shoe mouthpiece now because it was more comfortable, and that's the way you should approach it. What's comfortable, not what you should, what somebody tells you. You need to play what's comfortable for you. So, but yeah, I get it. I mean, you still have to develop too. I mean, you gotta have a mix of everything. You can't just, automatically start somebody out on a certain mouthpiece, expecting the world. So,
yeah. Well, as someone whose reputation is primarily that of a lead player, how much time do you spend working with someone on developing the chops to play, and then how do you create a more global approach to the horn, in terms of not just jazz literature but classical literature and things like that? I mean, how do you prefer to do it? I know everybody's individual depending on what they're desiring to get out of the process as well, but kind of as a general approach, how do you look at the development of your trumpet skills?
Well, with the younger kids, I mean, I like to get the Clarke Studies in as early as possible, because I think those, not necessarily the way Clarke wrote them, but adding some interpretations on it, maybe adding doing light tonguing and stuff, and doing some books that more long tones and stuff. Try to get a little bit of everything involved as early as possible, and not just wait for it to progress to that point. Because I don't like to teach out of only one book. I like to add things in. Like I've got a student now, 5th grader. I printed out a jazz lead part, or not lead, but a jazz head to Charlie Parker tune. And it's like, I just want you to learn this. I mean, maybe he'll take some interest in that. I'm trying to expose it earlier instead of waiting, a couple years down the road, because, you don't know what you might miss otherwise. I mean, but yeah, I mean, I tried to, as far as upper register teaching it, I don't really specifically say, this is what we got to do this. I think the Clarke Studies are fantastic in helping that along. Again, the parameters of that book, I mean, yeah, it's written more in the staff and stuff, but I like to go expand on the exercises, out of what is written, to develop the upper register. Because I still think, that was one of the first things with Stahl, with the lesson. I was doing Clarke Studies. I was practicing high, light, and actually with practice mutes in, and I gained accuracy with that. I gained a lot of upper register, because you learn how to, with the practice mute and stuff, it kind of changes everything that you're approaching with playing. But playing high and light tongue, I think for me anyway, that's really where I started to take off for the upper register. But again, I try to apply as much as I can to the younger students. Each his own. I mean, there's some kids that they're not interested. They just want to play, the method book as it is, and they're kind of reluctant to learn. I actually have a student that doesn't want to learn note names, and I'm like, this is very frustrating. You got to know note names, but I have to adapt or try to figure out a way to teach it to him without him realizing I'm teaching it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, I don't have one way of doing everything. I mean, I kind of let everybody develop their own little niche in their playing. So
yeah,
it's tough. I mean, it's completely different. I mean, I think the kids today just have so many more things that they're looking forward to. As soon as the lessons are over, everybody's running out of the house waiting to get on their game unit or something, or on their phone. It wasn't that way when I was growing up. I mean, yeah, I didn't have lessons, but I had friends that, they sat in practice because what else was there to do?
Yeah. Well, and you instilled that musical passion to your offspring as well, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. My youngest my oldest is killing it right now. I mean, she's already graduated Temple, and she's in Chicago now for her master's in clarinet, and she already has an orchestra gig out there. So I don't know. We'll see how that progresses. And my youngest, she has the talent, but she chose to go a different path in college next year. So I tried. 1 out of 2 is not bad, but my youngest has the same talent. She just didn't take the interest my oldest does. But yeah, my oldest is my mini me. I mean, she actually, she's better than anything I've done. So
well, it's nice to know there's another generation of Kennys out there.
Yeah. Yep.
Or maybe that's something to be scared of. I don't.
Yeah, she's got more opportunity than I ever had. So I'm very proud of both of them.
Well, and that's good, and it's kind of interesting in that you've got one that's choosing to go down that musical path, and then the other who's, I'm sure that music will always be a part of her life, but she's choosing to do something else. Much like you, staying true to herself, staying true to her heart. So you can't blame someone for doing that. And I think sometimes I've seen too many people who are whatever it is, and we'll just use musician or even trumpet players specifically. It's like I'm a trumpet player, and my kids are going to be trumpet players, and they're going to be professional trumpet players, and you can't do that, and you can't expect them to follow in your footsteps. All you can do is provide the guidance and the love and the support, and then let them grow to be their own.
Absolutely.
So
I mean, I was hoping for trumpet players. I tried, but I just didn't win. I mean, when my oldest picked a clarinet, I was like, really? We got to find another teacher. I could help you on trumpet, but my youngest almost played trombone. So, but I'm glad she stuck with flute. So she's still going to play in college. It's just not going to be her main thing. She's going for criminal justice, and she'll play in the college band and what have you. So they have a jazz band. So she's hoping to continue, at least having music in her life. So that's fine.
Well, and earlier you mentioned something in it actually this is a good segue into that. You talked about when you were younger playing in community bands. And I know that right now that you are playing in some community bands, as well as, doing your professional hits and things like that. Philly and DC, and I know you just did a big show up in Reading, the Berks Jazz Fest. You and Randy Brecker and Rick Braun.
Yeah, what a section.
Man, killer. but you still also do community band stuff. And I think that's something I think a lot of people don't take advantage of. And sometimes community bands fall apart because there's not enough support for them, or people don't know about them, so you lose the influx of talent. But I feel like that's because I always did that. Any opportunity I had to play, especially play with older cats, more community cats. When I was in high school, I'm playing with my band directors and people like that in community groups. So what do you see the role of community bands, community organizations, and what do you see as being the benefit of them, and maybe some suggestions that people would have either if they either want to join one or maybe start one of their own?
Yeah, I mean, sadly, most of the community bands are gone. I mean, when I was growing up, there were so many different, every Saturday night church picnics, it was always some little concert band going on. But I think it's the greatest thing for young players to get exposed to older players. I mean, I really push it. I mean, I think it's a great thing for a 7th or 8th grader to sit alongside a senior in high school playing, because, it just promotes that much more growth. I mean, I think I learned the most from that in my middle school years, because there was some guys that were in high school that I just really looked up to, me, and they took me under their wing. And I was so grateful, because again, I didn't have anybody teach me double tonguing, and these guys, like, this is how you do it, so I learned a lot. And then playing in those community bands, a lot of those marches and stuff, you had to use that. So I gained a ton of experience. And, I think, yeah, sadly, I mean, it's just the community bands right now are really older players, and it's like the youth are not following that path again, because there's so much other stuff for them to do. Um, but I think it's the greatest thing, because, it's sometimes the professional playing isn't always fun, because, you got your demands you got to keep up to. And a lot of times community bands are more fun. I'm not saying that I don't have fun on gigs, but I mean, it's a night and day scenario when you can just go play and have fun with friends and stuff. And yeah, I just, the importance of it, I don't know. I learned a ton from it. I mean, I wish there was more groups around. It's hard to start anything up because, again, the kids aren't outside of school. They really aren't doing a whole lot. So I don't know. I was super grateful for, there was a guy that was 4 years older than me and a guy that was 5 years older than me. And I just, they took me under their wing, and without them, I wouldn't have learned the technical part of trumpet in high school, really. I mean, and that was after they were out of high school. I was playing community bands with them and looking up to them. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. It's sometimes I feel like, it's, if a band is available, that's always the first part. There's got to be a band available, but not every kid has got the gumption to put themselves into those situations. It's like that shyness and stuff like that. And I think that sometimes it's because the other players in the band make it intimidating. Right. So if it is a warm and welcoming thing, and it's that certainly you want the best out of every person, but you're not having the same expectations in that band. Like if you're in a community jazz band, for example, you're playing in a community big band, the expectation should always be that you do your best, but the level of expectation on that gig, or you're playing in that band, is going to be different than like when you were playing with Dave, and if you chip the 16th note, you're getting the stare of death. So how do you go about making less experienced, and not even just younger players, but just less experienced players feel comfortable to be in an organization with you, particularly if it's like a community-based thing, as opposed to being a high-profile paying gig?
Well, first of all, they got to understand it's not a competition. I mean, none of the musical ensembles of any sort should be a competition. I mean, you need to play as a unit, and not say I can do this better than you. And trumpet players get the bad rap of that, especially. But and I think at the lower levels, it's too much of that competition because, in my own experience, the better players support each other, I got the sub for a guy down in DC, and it's like, and I played in a section where, I didn't feel like I should have even been part of, but those guys made it so comfortable to play and they supported me. So I wish younger players could feel that same part, because I know in high school, even to this day, you can tell that it's always competition, who can end on the higher note. It's like, it's not about that. It's about making music. And I think we lose that. And it's immaturity too. I mean, it goes hand in hand, but, yeah, when I have a kid, if I have somebody that's sitting in a section that's not as experienced, I mean, I try to make them feel comfortable. I try to compliment them. I don't rip them apart. I mean, that's not what I'm there for. I mean, you got to gain confidence. I mean, my thing, I'm a shy person. I mean, typically without my trumpet in my hand, I don't talk. And leading my own big band, that's been the biggest problem because I don't like to talk in front of people. But it's a confidence thing. You got to learn it. You got to learn the fact that not everybody's judging you. Yeah, there's always going to be somebody in the audience that's going to judge, but within a section, you got to support each other. I mean, and not rip them down. Don't constantly critique things. I mean, yeah, you need to give advice, but you got to learn how to do it too. I mean, you can't yell at somebody for chipping a 16 note.
Well, you can, but it's not a good thing to do. So.
Right. It happens.
Just because
everybody
you
makes
can doesn't mean you should.
That's right. Everybody makes a mistake. So
yeah. Well, and I kind of want to transition now to you were talking about your new big band, which I think is exciting. And I can't actually wait to hear you guys play. It seems like every time
Me too.
playing, I just can't. Like you're doing is it? I always get, is it Andrew or Pete New?
Andrew New, he has a big band in Philly. I'm his lead player too.
Yeah, that I would see like some things with the Andrew New band, like, oh, Craig's gonna be playing, I should go. I got a gig, or I got to go out of town. So I'm gonna catch you soon. I promise. I swear. But you went through an experience that I wanted to talk about, and I think this is really the one of the main things I wanted to talk with you about, because I think it's something that is so important for many players. You went through a bout of Bells Palsy, which prevented you from being able to play, and you kind of had to retool your approach to trumpet playing. And there are so many different things that are important, I think, in what happened, in that how you dealt with coming back at a high level after such a devastating incident, and then so there's the technical side of things, but also the mental side of things, and like dealing with the anxiety or depression or fear, a concern that we all feel when we feel like we're never going to be able to play again. So let's maybe talk, get into that, and like what happened, how you dealt with it from the technical perspective, and how you had to deal with it from a mental perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough. I guess it was September of 2019, right after I turned 50. Man, it's like that age, and then everything goes down quick. I got sick the following weekend after I turned 50, and I had thrush. And I had it for a couple weeks. Stahl, we had some gigs and stuff, and I actually had to end up playing the fourth book because the thrush had my chops so screwed up. I mean, luckily I've had great section players that I can trust to fill in. I mean, so yeah, I moved myself to the fourth book to get through a couple weeks having thrush, and it got better and it got better. And then all of a sudden, in like the third week of October, I wake up and my right side of my face is just hanging. And I didn't know what to do. I mean, I thought, well, I probably had a stroke, in sleep or whatever. But so called my doc to get an appointment. Of course, I couldn't get into the later day. So I sat at home, of course, diagnosing myself. It's like, Google this, Google that, Google that. So I became my own doctor. And I kind of figured out it was Bell's palsy before I even went to the doctor. So the thrush actually triggered the Bell's palsy. which I had no idea. I mean, there's so many things that causes Bell's palsy, but thrush is one of the viruses that can, affect that. So, um, went to the doctor, and the doctor agreed, it's Bell's palsy. Like, yeah, like I'm my own doctor. Um, I was put on some meds and stuff to deal with it. And he's like, oh, you'll be fine. You live through Bell's palsy. It's no big deal. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm a trumpet player. And I was, wasn't sure how this was going to happen. So the next day, it was one of those things where I started watching videos on Bell's palsy and other trumpet players. And, there's some horrific cases of Bell's palsy that's just eliminated careers. I mean, guys that had it so bad that they never came back from it. So I decided I was going to get on Facebook and put a video of me playing. And at that point, I might have been able to play maybe E in the staff to B, and that was it. Everything else was just air. I mean, I lost all the air out of the side of my mouth. I couldn't play. So I let it go on Facebook, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'll probably get ripped apart, left and right from people on Facebook. And actually, it turned out to be the best thing I've ever done, because that night into the next morning, all of a sudden I had 300 messages from people all over. Luckily, I'm friends with a lot of people, predominant players and stuff. And, they were giving me all this advice on, how to deal with it. And actually there's a local lady to me that had Bells. It's a bassoonist, and, she's recovered too as well. So, but, I got a ton of different, directions to go. I was told to do, there's a Feldenkrais exercise. It's where the brain reconnects to muscles. It's facial exercises basically. I was told acupuncture, which actually acupuncture was nice, irregardless. I was told a whole bunch of other different, things to try to remedy it. By gosh, a couple of days later, I had two people, Dan Miller and Marty Bound from New York. They both gave me Bobby Shue's number, and they're like, you got to call him. He'll get you back. And I hooked up with Bobby, and that was the road back. I don't know why I owe everything to Bobby. I mean, nothing else really worked. And that was part of the problem, because I was trying too many directions. I wasn't focusing on one thing, because that was one of the first things Bobby's like, let's stick to this plan. Because I told him, I was doing this Feldenkrais exercises, like, no, get rid of that. Don't do that. Do his way of doing it to come back, and we'll do it. So, well, first thing was to learn to put the horn away for a bit. So, I took some time off. Bobby gave me some exercises, cheek flutters, doing warm compresses on the cheek, both cheeks actually, to keep everything even. After a few weeks, I started buzzing on a trombone mouthpiece. So that started facilitating, the muscles again. And then in a few more weeks, then I started buzzing on a trumpet mouthpiece again. So it was a long process to come back. I mean, it wasn't just snap the fingers and back. But he continued to work with me, and I had my first gig back with Stahl about the third week of December that year. And it wasn't good. I was passing parts to everybody. I mean, I couldn't play the whole gig on lead. I mean, I was still fluttering the cheek and stuff. This was probably about 8 weeks after the initial happening. So, but Bobby had me to the point where I could play again. There wasn't any double C's coming out, or, nothing. There wasn't any flash out of my bell, that's for sure. But luckily, like I said, my guys in the Stahl band were always top notch, and I could pass a part to anybody and know they could capably, take it. So, at the end of December, probably about 10 weeks in, started playing fairly well again, but I didn't have the endurance. I still felt weakness. I still would wake up, and that's the thing. Even to this day, there's some days I wake up with weakness in my right side, which scares the life out of me, because every time it happens, I'm thinking, uh-oh, this is going down again. But thankfully it doesn't. Excuse me. So, that was 2020. The last Stahl big band gig was February. I would say I was about 80% back for that last job, because that was it for the band. Well, then COVID started anyway. So I continued with Bobby, getting help with him. I think it took solid year till I really felt comfortable, but everything changed. Probably the best thing about dealing with shoe was, and starting over to a respect, I eliminated some problems that I had before. Couldn't use the same mouthpiece. The mouthpiece I played felt really small, so I had to find a whole different mouthpiece. So that worked out in that respect. But I continued just to do the protocol, as he calls it, and I practiced every day, and I kept going forward. In hindsight, I forgot to also tell Bobby, oh, by the way, I lost about 90 pounds at the same time, because that was another. In looking back, we don't know which was worse, the bells or losing the weight dramatically. So it was I made it probably harder on myself to come back by doing everything. So, it was a good year. After the Stahl band ended, the drummer and I decided we were going to form our own jazz orchestra. So that summer, even with COVID going on, we did some outdoor gigs in New Jersey. And I started really feeling back myself, even though I felt like I was a completely different player. I mean, even to this day, I don't feel like, I feel like I'm a totally more finesse kind of player. I let, the compression do more of the playing than to the big volumes of air or whatever. So, we did some outdoor gigs, and things started going well. So, at that point, I think I was starting to play better than I had before, just because I think I corrected some problems that I had that I didn't realize I was doing. Because I'm a more efficient player. I mean, no doubt. I mean, that was probably the benefit of Bells Palsy, is I became a more efficient player. So that's kind of where that whole progress happened. But yeah, I mean, without Shu, without Dan Miller and Marty give me his number, because again, I was going in 1,000 directions trying to take everybody's advice, and it was just too much information, basically. And maybe something else would have worked, but I went the right direction.
Yeah, well, Bobby is definitely one of the most insightful teachers that I've ever met. And the man's just he's operating on a different level. And yeah, I love him to death. And just such a great guy, just in general, he's kind of a no BS guy, but but still, he likes to see people make progress. And
well, and he told me up front, he's like, you're number 27 on my list, you're not going to fail. So he was very very positive in every aspect, and we had good conversations too outside. But yeah, I mean, of a player of that caliber making you feel that comfortable was really a game changer for me. I mean, my attitude since Bell is completely different. I mean, I was more of that competitive player before Bells. Now I'm not. I mean, I'll pass parts, I'll gladly give people parts, and I try to support people more than ever. Matter of fact, there's been some people that have had Bells now that I've reached out to, saying, hey, I've been through this, I'd like to help if I can. I mean, I'm not Bobby Shu, but I can help you.
Yeah. Well, it's just, knowing that someone has gone through it, someone has come through the other side of it. And that's certainly important. And it's kind of interesting because what you're saying about you've corrected some things about your playing that maybe you didn't realize before. It's like when things are working, if we're at least getting close to the result we wanted, like 90%, it's like, okay, hey, I'm good. I'm not messing with anything. And sometimes what it takes is this kind of a drastic event in our lives to make us take stock of what we're doing and to retool. And then in the process of retooling, then you can make those corrections that maybe you couldn't when you were when you're working full time. I know, for myself, like there's a period of time, like 7 years, where I didn't play my horn. And when I came back, my approach was completely different. And then I've had a few surgeries, since I've been back playing, and, where I can't play for 6 weeks. And when I've come back from those, I feel like each time I come back, I'm approaching the horn a little bit differently. I'm trying to become a little bit more efficient and, trying to correct whatever things that were wrong, and allowing the muscle memory to kind of dissipate so I can reinstall new, more efficient approaches, especially as we get older, man. We can't pound out all night long. That's crazy.
Well, and for the most part, for 20 some years, I really only played with Dave Stahl. I mean, he took me on gigs, but I never ventured outside of him, which is another conversation. But I just, I was content, probably too content. And some of the, doors that have opened now have really changed everything, really. I mean, I even changed trumpets last year. I mean, I started feeling that my previous horn was too big now, for how I'm playing now. So, yeah, I think I'm playing much better than I ever have, really. I mean, yeah, there's still chip notes, there's still mistakes, but everybody does it. I don't dwell on them like I did. It was, and previously it was one of those things where you were reminded of your mistakes, and now it's like everybody's having fun. It's more of a group. It feels more like a family section now. It's not such dwell on what has happened. So I'm trying to keep that door closed.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing, and I think certainly it's one that we learn, later in life. Unfortunately, it's life's too short, to fret about stuff that then in the grand scheme of things are really irrelevant.
Yeah.
And the search for perfectionism, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, you certainly always want to try and improve. You always want to do your best, but life is mistakes, and for me, I mean, maybe it's just my way of justifying the fact that I'm just such a sloppy player, but it's there are times when I'll beat myself up and I feel like, oh man, I just sounded like absolute doo-doo on the gig. And people will come up afterwards and they'll talk about how great the band was, and they'll say, oh, you sounded great, and I really love the horns and things like that. They don't know. They didn't notice. They didn't notice that, I chipped that note, because they're too busy, enjoying the evening, enjoying the experience. And, we hold on to that. And then, then you come to the next gig and you're like, oh crap, I hope I don't miss that high F sharp again. And so you set yourself up for failure instead of saying, okay, I missed it and it's gone. The next time, I'm just gonna do my best, and hopefully it'll be there. And if I'm having fun, the energy will come out in my music, and then everybody else is having fun, and then I'm successful.
Well, and I that's still a weakness of mine. If I'm playing something and after we're done and somebody in the crowd comes up, complimenting left and right, I still find myself saying, nah, I screwed this up, I screwed that up, and I shouldn't be doing that. I should be saying, thanks, that taking it as a positive instead of thinking, oh, I shouldn't have screwed that up, or this note might have been a little out of tune or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely one of my weaknesses yet I'm trying to improve on. It's just not to dwell on the little stuff anymore. So because again, it should be about making the music, shouldn't be what happened. So.
Yeah. Well, and even with like your recovery from Bells, I know that there had to come a point where you were just like, what do I do if I can't play again? Because we get so invested in our identities become tied to the things that we do instead of the things that we do being an expression of our identity. And I personally have gone through that with music and with other things that I've done in my life. And just having to come to that thing of, I'm me, and regardless of whether I'm playing trumpet or doing anything else, I'm still me.
Right.
So, when you were facing that, dark night of the soul, what kind of helped you to get through that and, make peace with the process?
Yeah, I mean, for a while it was every night just doubting, I mean, is this worth it? Is this worth it? And then with COVID starting and nothing happening, actually ended up probably being a good thing because I wasn't put on the spot, trying to, playing, failing. And not that COVID was good, but I'm just saying, it was probably a good time off. Let's put it that way. But yeah, I mean, it was, I guess the incremental progress is what started, sparking me again, because the first 6 weeks or so, even with talking with Bobby and stuff, it was bad. I mean, it was one of those things where, a lot of times I'd sit at night and dwell on, all the stuff I got to play, and is this real that, may not happen again? And, it was reality. I mean, I could have easily just put it away and forgot about it, because it was a lot of work coming back. But like I said, it seemed like every little progress I made was just another spark to saying, hey, this is coming, this is coming. And I just kept that daily kind of outlook, anything that, anytime I could gain another note or so, or I could do something different, because for the longest time, the right corner of my mouth, I mean, I was seeping air for, even when I was back, I mean, probably for about 5 months after, I still would have occasional times I would just seep a little air. That would drive me nuts. But, one day when that didn't do it as much, I was like, oh, okay, that's getting better now. It wasn't one of these things where, snap the fingers and everything got better. It was just a daily incremental, progression. So,
All right. So, I mean, so, like you're saying, you've talked to some people, reached out to some people who are suffering from bells. And there's lots of other things that occur that, you talked about, you thought you were having a stroke. I mean, people that recover from strokes, from heart surgeries, things like that. There are all kinds of things that can happen that can create a breakdown in our physical system that prevents us to play. And, like we're talking about, there's the mental component of that as well. So just kind of as a general, if you were able to give advice, so if there's somebody out there in the audience right now that's watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, that's struggling with a physical change that's affected their playing, what is the one piece of advice, or the main piece of advice that you would want to give them about the attitude that they need to take with coming back?
Well, I mean, first they got to look, in their heart. I mean, if it's something that's not that important to them, you got to put things in perspective. I had a little extra incentive after the Stahl ban ended to continue. So that was also a spark for me. But, if somebody's trying to come back from it, I'd say you got to stay positive. I mean, you got to find something every day that's going to make it better. I know it's hard, and, sometimes you struggle to find anything that's better, but my thing was every day when I tried to practice, I tried to either do something different, or if I noticed something different, sadly my computer crashed because I kept the daily log, and I lost the log, but I kept daily progress. And excuse me, before I lost that computer, unfortunately I didn't back it up. But yeah, I mean, I went back and read my notes, and it's like, man, all right, I see how everything went. And it was based on the fact of staying positive. And again, that was surrounded by positive people, because all of a sudden I had support from people that I didn't think would know me. With the Facebook friends and stuff, there's some people that are way above my pay scale that contacted me and was like, how are you doing? And it shocked me, I don't want to drop names, but I mean, it's like people that I look up to, but I didn't think would even know me. But yeah, they read enough on my Facebook posts to, actually contact me personally and say, how's this going? And excuse me, sorry, allergies are terrible. But it was such an incentive when I would get positive feedback, along with noticing things on my own. So, I would say stay positive. I mean, and the other things in life too, you got to try to make peace with things. Got a lot of skeletons in my closet too, but I mean, I tried to make peace with as many things as I could, to keep everything positive, not let anything down.
Well, that's very, very sound advice. So thanks for sharing that. All right. Well, we have a few standard segments that we need to get through on today's episode, and I'm going to transition to the first one, and this is brought to us by my good friend Michael Barkley of Barkley Microphones. Great ribbon microphones for recording. There's one right there, and they're very affordable. So if you're in the market for a new ribbon microphone, definitely check Mike out. And this segment is called Sound Off, and it's about your approach to sound. And we talked a little bit earlier about listening to different lead players, and to try and to establish some concepts of how to approach the music. But when you're working on your sound, what are some of the things that you do to get the sound that's in your head out of your horn?
Well, I mean, again, it's listening, because I think first is being able to hear what you need to play before you actually play it. I mean, if I'm playing a Woody chart, I can hear the way Bill Chase played it, without actually listening to the recording. And I think it's so important to listen. And I can't stress the importance enough to educate yourself, be your own, student of the past players. But yeah, when I go approach to play something, I mean, as far as the sound, I want the sound that I'm hearing from whatever band it was, or whoever that I recognize most that played the lead book. But yeah, I just, I'm definitely a lead player. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Those are the notes that I hear. I mean, in my head and stuff, those are the phrases I hear. That's what I whistle, that's, that's, the basis of what's going on in my head. So, if I'm listening to any music, I mean, I'm listening to the top line of the trumpet usually. I mean, maybe that's not a good thing, but that's where my mind ends. But I think the importance of being able to hear something before you play it is the ultimate, way of approaching the sound.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right. Our next segment is called Geared Up. And this is brought to us by Venture Mouthpieces, where technology, design, and craftsmanship intersect. Use the code TrumpetGurus21 to get 10% off your order. And this is about gear. Got to talk gear. And you mentioned that since you've come back from your bells, that you've changed your gear setup. So you've gone to a different mouthpiece size and a different horn. So what are you, when you're looking at changing your gear? This was out of necessity. What were kind of the motivating factors? What are the things that determine the right horn for you and the right mouthpiece setup?
As far as the mouthpiece goes, it was a struggle. I mean, I used to be a real specs nut. I mean, I would look at specs on everything, and I don't know, I got hooked up with a company in 2011, and the guy was like, just forget what it says, find something that plays what you feel. And I played that mouthpiece for up until Bells. And when I was coming back, it felt very small. I don't know what changed. I mean, again, it could have been weight loss too, because I was dealing with that. So, I mean, physically I changed, and I don't know what, but, I started working with a guy in Nashville with mouthpieces, and, I was trying different sizes, what fit right, what felt right, without looking at numbers. Because I think we get too involved with specs. It's more about, what's comfortable and what works for you. So, I'm working with Steve Patrick now, playing his equipment, his mouthpieces. So he's spot on. As far as the trumpet, I played the same trumpet for about 20 years. It was actually Wayne Bergeron's Canstel. Actually, a funny story about that. When I bought that horn from him in 2001, I was at a rehearsal, and everything was the ball was rolling about buying a horn from him. And I get home from rehearsal, and my wife goes, some guy named Wayne Bergeron called for you, and you're to watch American Idol tonight because he's playing your horn to see how it works on stage. And I'm like, you don't know who Wayne Bergeron is? Because she's not a musician. But, I was like, I can't believe I was away to miss his phone call, because I was such a homer for him. But anyway, I played his cancel for, up until last year, and it just started feeling really big. So, Philadelphia is a Yamaha town pretty much. And good friend of mine always has his trunk load of Yamaha trumpets, it seems. And he switched me over to the Bergeron Yamaha, and it felt tighter, and it was better in tune. It just played better overall than the cancel. Again, so much stuff is mental, I think. But of course, yeah, with working with Bobby, I tried to play one of the shoehorns, but it just didn't work. A little too tight for me. I wasn't quite that efficient. Maybe someday. But yeah, I switched horns too. Right now, I mean, I think I'm between the combination of the Patrick mouthpiece and the Yamaha horn, I'm pretty much can be spot on when I'm feeling good. So, but very happy with what I'm playing now.
That's good. Yeah, and like you said, there are some changes when there are physiological changes. The equipment may need to change to balance that out. So,
yeah. And age too.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because I played. I have a horn that I played. You mentioned Jerry Callett. I had a Callett that I played. Pretty much from the mid 80s up until maybe about 2000 something. And I had a little incident where I had I hate to admit this to all of you trumpet players out there. I took my horn with me on vacation to visit my family in South Carolina, and I left my trumpet there.
Oh.
I realized at 2.5 hours on the trip home, like, oh crap, I left my horn there. And I had a gig, in 2 days. I had a rehearsal the next night and a gig. And I fortunately still had my Callett sitting in my room because kind of my backup. And I played that horn, and I played a rehearsal. I practiced one night, played the rehearsal, played the gig. And my horn, my regular horn showed up the day of the gig. And I'm like, oh, but I felt so good on that Callett, man. I noticed that I've been having trouble slotting or suddenly popping in, and I warmed up on both horns and decided I'm gonna stick with my Callett. I went back to that, but my playing has kind of gone through these little dips and valleys. But as I've been trying to work on some different things, and I'm finding that the approach I'm using is working better on that horn than it is on my regular horn. So
yeah, right.
God, you can get a rabbit hole on that crap.
Absolutely. That's why I say stay away from specs, play what feels best.
Yeah. Well, if I had the money, I would probably end up being worse than Lou Soloff. I would have like 50 mouthpieces and 50 horns, around me at all times. So
I was playing a gig with him, and he was doing the Maria Maynard solo. He must have changed mouthpieces 4 times during that solo. I mean, during that one tune. It's like, man, what a nut.
But hey, it worked for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there was no doubt that Lou was one hell of a player.
Phenomenal.
So, yep. Yeah. All right. So here's our final segment, and this is brought to us by Robinson's Remedies, our Robinson's Remedy Rapid Relief for your sore and tired chops. This is the Robinson's Remedy Rapid Fire Rounds, a series of questions that bounce all over the place, and just want to get your quickest answer to these. So, okay. Craig, are you ready, my friend?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right, here we go. First question: who's the biggest influence on your life that is not a trumpet player?
Both my parents.
All right. What's your favorite book?
Marty Bound sent me a Talent Code book.
Oh, that's an excellent book.
Phenomenal. Yes.
One of my favorites. What's the worst movie you've ever seen?
Anything on the Hallmark Channel.
I am with you on that. If you weren't a trumpet player, what would you want to be?
Ironically, growing up, I wanted to be a truck driver. So I don't know where that came from, but I don't know. I mean, actually, the older I get, the more I'm into history. So I probably would be not a teacher, but some kind of historian as far as studying things. I mean, I really dig war history right now. I mean, especially Civil War.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, maybe your love for trucks came. Yeah, you're about that age. You probably remember Smoking the Bandit. Maybe that's what it was.
I was not going to say that, but yeah, that's where it came from.
All right. Well, your secret is out now. I'm sorry about that.
That's good.
All right. You could have a dinner party and invite any three living people. Any three people in the world could come to your dinner party. Who would you want to have as your guest?
I can't have a banquet.
Oh well, no.
All right. Bobby Shue, Elon Musk, and this is going to throw you, Michael Jordan.
Oh, well, that's it. I'm a big fan of MJ when it comes to
greatest of all time.
He's the GOAT, man. Same dinner party, 3 extra chairs, any 3 people from history.
Well, since my faith tells me I'll see my parents again, it would have to be Maynard, Bill Chase, and Bud Brisboy.
Ooh, man, talk about some firepower.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right, lacquer, plated, or raw?
Yeah, there's another funny one. It just changed. I like silver plate now. I mean, I used to be more, the brushed raw brass, but recently I switched to silver.
Oh, okay. What's your favorite quote?
Michael Jordan. I never lost a game. I just ran out of time.
Oh, okay. I like that one. What's your greatest fear?
I guess the future of my health. It seems like it's being more of a struggle getting older. So, I shouldn't make it about me. I mean, there's more problems in the world than me for sure. But, personally, I don't know if I would come back from Bells again. So there's a lot of things, going in my head for that question, but I fear, the future for health, really.
Well, it definitely becomes a concern as we get a little older and
absolutely.
we things. So yeah, absolutely. All right. You could be granted one superpower. What would it be?
Easy, to heal people. I saw my dad go through leukemia, and then I saw my mom go through Alzheimer's. The leukemia wasn't that bad to deal with, but Alzheimer's, man, there's nothing worse. Just that was traumatic for me, losing my mom to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, healing, we need a lot of healing in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Physically and in many other ways too.
Yeah.
What aspect of trumpet playing do you feel is the most overrated?
Maybe not the playing part of it, but the progression of mouthpieces. I mean, that's such a thing with me. You got to do this, you got to play that, you got to play that. I mean, I know some people say, high notes are overrated, but I think people that say that can't do it. And if I'm going to say something I don't do well is double tonguing or triple tonguing. So, if I'm going to fall in that crutch, but no, man, I just, this progression that you got to do this, you got to play this, you got to play a Bach horn to fit in. I don't subscribe to any of that. I mean, you are your sound, before the equipment.
All right, good. What aspect do you think is the most underrated?
Well, I think my personal experience, I think practicing quiet gains a lot of accuracy. I know, a lot of people just focus in on, playing as they're going to play it, play something as a performance. But, a lot of my time practicing is high and quiet with mutes in. I think it better regulates your compression. You pull the mute out, you have better control, you have better air control. So I think it's not enough, emphasis is put on that part of the practice. I mean, everybody's trying to play the notes on the page instead of trying to figure out a way to make that page play better.
Okay, I like that. You're able to go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice about music. What would it be?
Get some courage. I mean, like I said, coming from Central PA to Philadelphia was culture shock. And I sit here and wonder a lot of times, what if I would have gone to Temple, if I would have been exposed to, city life, where I would be, maybe nowhere. I mean, maybe I'd be back where I am. So, going back, I would say, have a little more courage, and because I am typically a shy person. So believe it or not, the trumpet talks, I don't.
Well, yeah. And what advice would you give about life?
Yeah, something I have a hard time grasping on is staying positive about everything, trying to make something positive, out of the worst scenario. Um, Dealing with the health issues with my parents and stuff, yeah, it was down times, but I learned something from each, thing. I learned to, care more, love more, and respect more.
Yeah. All right. Final question for you, Craig Kenney. What do you want your legacy to be?
Legacy. The most important part is I hope my girls grow up saying they had a great dad. I've in general, I try to put everybody else first, and I hope they put it in front with their lives. Don't tear people down. Try to put everybody first, and do your best. So,
well, that, my friend, is a noble venture, and I certainly know that you're moving every day towards that being a reality. So just keep on keeping on, man.
Yep.
So yeah, thanks for spending time with me, and seriously, we got to get together like in person soon.
Sounds good.
Real soon.
All right.
And best of luck, and with the new band and all your new ventures and things like that. And folks, definitely keep an eye out if you are in the Pennsylvania, New York area. Keep an eye out.
You can always find me on Facebook. You can find my band, which is the Liebman Kenney Jazz Orchestra.
Yeah. So
EABMAN Kenney Orchestra.
We'll put the link in the show notes, and and please, if you or someone that is suffering from some sort of a physical setback that's affecting your playing, recommend this episode to them, to anybody that is struggling with this, because I think that Craig's story speaks volumes for what it takes to get through that process. So thanks for being willing to share your story. So
absolutely.
All right, and thanks everybody for joining us on this episode, and as always, peace and slide grease. We out.
Thanks, Jose.
Thanks for hanging with us today. This podcast is all about creating deeper connections through our mutual love of music and the trumpet life. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast, and also like and share this episode with a friend. We want to see the hang grow for show. Please support our sponsors, and consider becoming a personal supporter of this podcast as well. Remember, for less than the price of a bottle of valve oil a month, you can keep this podcast moving smoothly. The Trumpet Gurus Hang is recorded at the Candy Factory, a co-working space and social club located in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Jose Johnson is the executive producer. Post-production editing is by Mitch Bowers. Our opening theme song was composed and performed by Lexi Signor, and our closing theme music comes courtesy of The Greatest Funeral Ever. Incidental music is by Ethan Swayze and Jose Johnson. Graphic design by Ann Kirby of the Sweet Corps. The Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast is produced in collaboration with the So Good Lancaster Media Group.